Joining me now for more is Nicco Mele, internet expert and author of the new book, The End of Big, How the Internet Makes David the New Goliath. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, let's not take sides because each side has its own story, but is there a way to really determine where cyber attacks originate?
It's possible to determine where cyber attacks originate. It takes a lot of work. It's non-trivial. It's quite difficult, but it can frequently be very hard to determine if it's an individual or a group or a government behind it. You might be able to tell where it's coming from, what building, what computer, but the motivations and really proving a causal link is quite difficult.
You know, we hear about these big cyber attacks, they become public knowledge, but how often are organizations and industries unknowingly breached around the world? Is it happening a lot more than we realize?
Oh, it happens. It happens hundreds, if not thousands of times a day on all kinds of sites, from regular mom and pop small websites to large corporate websites. The truth of the matter is that attacks are a relatively commonplace occurrence in this day and age. And one of the challenges of what's going on is different organizations and groups and governments are trying to figure out how to deal with an evolving security landscape and figure out what appropriate responses look like.
So I guess when we hear about them, it's like, hey, we know we're on to you. We realized what happened and we're watching you now. Is that kind of what we should take when we hear about these big cyber attacks?
Yeah, I think that if we look at what the White House put out today, there weren't necessarily very strong or very clear guidelines about how to respond to cyber attacks. It was more a focus on them, just to say we're going to really look at these very hard. This is now a priority. And it was also an encouragement of different industry groups to take security more seriously and to develop some common standards and methodologies for tighter security.
Well, you know, we keep hearing about these, and obviously it's not just the United States who has designated teams to address this issue, other countries as well. Do you ever think we'll see a type of cyber war between entities or between countries? And if we do, what will that look like?
It's really hard to say. The landscape has changed dramatically. Every single person with a laptop and an internet connection could pose a potential threat, could be a perpetrator of an act of cyber terrorism or cyber espionage. And identifying the sources of attacks and figuring out the motivations is a labyrinth. You know, if you have an airplane and if you have a fighter jet and you fly your fighter jet into another country's airspace, you know where that fighter jet's come from. You have some sense of the resources required to build the fighter jet and to launch it. People can't build fighter jets in their backyards. But cyber attacks are very different. As I talk about in my book, it really empowers a wide range of individuals. Anyone with sufficient motivation and knowledge can cause a problem. And that creates major challenges for states, for governments, trying to figure out what is the appropriate measure of response when you're facing a new kind of threat, not one that is easily quantified or dealt with our existing institutions.
All right, Nicco Mele, thank you so much for your time.